Hello, and welcome to this special presentation of Healthy Connections, Physical Distancing with Children and Grandchildren, a Survival Guide. Today's topic at hand has to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic, and we'll be hearing from our keynote presenters, Tammy Corbett-Alderman, who is a licensed psychologist with Marshall University's Department of Psychology. We also have Marianna Footo-Linz, who will be joining us a little later for the Q&A portion. She's the chair of Marshall University's Department of Psychology. And today's webinar is being produced by Misty Dyke from Quality Insights. She'll be helping us with the Q&A process a little later on. If you have questions or comments for our keynote presenters, you can submit them using the chat or Q&A function in WebEx at any time. Please also note that we are recording today's presentation and we'll have it on the Healthy Connections website at healthyconnectionswb.org and our YouTube channel shortly after the conclusion of today's presentation. Me, I'm Shanen Wright. I'll tell you a little bit more about myself in a second, but first I want to tell those of you who are not familiar with Healthy Connections just a brief overview of what this coalition does. Healthy Connections is based in Huntington, West Virginia, with the purpose of helping pregnant women, mothers, and their families navigate treatment and support services available within the community. Healthy Connections membership includes more than 30 Huntington area agencies that are working together with this shared mission. Now me, I'm Shanen Wright. I'm the Media Marketing Work Group co-chair for the Healthy Connections Coalition, and I'm also Director of Innovation for an organization called Quality Insights. If you're not familiar with Quality Insights, we're one of the largest nonprofit organizations solely devoted to improving healthcare quality. We use data and community solutions to achieve the goals of better care, smarter spending, and healthier people. Our 300-plus employees and consultants have diverse background and experience in healthcare delivery, continuous quality improvement, medical record abstraction, data analysis, social marketing, and much more. Quality Insights serves Healthy Connections by providing in-kind marketing, branding, web infrastructure development, partnership coordination, resource creation, earned media generation, advertising, and production of webinars, just like today's special presentation. And with that, it's my great pleasure to turn the floor over to our keynote speaker, Tammy Corbett-Alderman, a licensed psychologist with Marshall University and also a currently practicing psychologist in Barboursville, West Virginia. Tammy?
All right. Thank you so much, Shanen, for that introduction. We will jump right into things and get started here. And I'm trying to get my little key is not allowing me to switch our slides.
Okay. I can jump in here. If you try clicking on the
I'm sorry. Yep, you told me that
and then
before.
you're up down.
All right. Yep. A little technical difficulty. Sorry about that. All right. Thank you all for joining us today. I wanted to start out our webinar by talking about this term that we're hearing a lot, social distancing. We really want to kind of reframe this and think about things more in terms of physical distancing rather than social distancing, because while, yes, we have to adhere to all the guidelines that we've been given by the CDC about maintaining physical space, we also want to make sure, though, that we still remain socially connected with other people. And we're going to talk about that today. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about some of the stressors that many of us might be feeling in response to COVID-19. We've listed some of these stressors that many of you might be feeling. Unfortunately, it takes both this slide and the next slide because we thought of so many, and there may be many more that we didn't think about. But some of the stressors that we might be feeling, loss of events that we like to enjoy. So our pleasurable activities have been greatly diminished. We can't go to movies or ball games or concerts or even having dinner out. For many of you, it's the loss of milestones like graduations, be it kindergarten graduations, middle school or high school graduations, proms. Entire sports seasons have been lost in response to COVID-19. We also have a loss of alone time because we're all quarantined at our homes, and so we're being confined and we don't have time to get away for ourselves very often. Many of us are worried about children's educational needs being met. We're having to try to homeschool or do things like that, which can be challenging. Some of us are worried about local businesses surviving. When this is all over, will our favorite eatery be open? Or maybe you have your own business that you're worried about surviving. In addition to this, we have all concerns about the threat of contracting COVID-19 for ourselves or for loved ones. Work stress for parents. Many of us are trying to work from home while also juggling the responsibilities that we have there at home with caring for our children. Work stressors for many of us who've resulted in loss of income or a significant reduction in hours, so it's contributed to some financial stressors. How are we going to pay the bills? For essential workers, many of them are struggling with closed child care centers or having to make the choice of leaving children at home alone, depending on their age. Many of us are having to share small confined spaces with everybody being home at once. Some of us are having to play multiple roles with our kids being home and serving as both their caretaker and pseudo teacher as well. And then our children may be struggling with this learning forum that they have now, where a lot of their instruction they're having to figure out on their own and without the aid of their teachers. And then our children have their own anxiety regarding COVID-19 virus. So we're going to try to touch on all of these things, kind of considering these stressors. So the first thing we wanted to talk about when we said we'd like to reframe to the concept of physical distancing rather than social distancing, because we'd really like to help people get refocused on ways that they can be connected with each other. As human beings, we all have a natural desire to be connected with other people. So there are some things that we can all do to continue that social connection with other people. And right now, probably more than in any other time in the past, we have a lot of ways to maintain contact with other people. FaceTime, I like that one better than calling. Calling's still good, but FaceTime, we can see that familiar face of a friend or a loved one that we haven't been able to physically see. We can text people or even emails or social media forums. And another one I think we might want to reconsider is we've maybe gotten out of the habit of handwritten letters or cards. And if you think about it, wouldn't it be great when you go to the mailbox to get one of those bills that you're trying to figure out how you're going to pay, if there was a letter in there from somebody telling you that they hope you have a good day or maybe how important you've been in their life. So these are ways that we can maintain social connection with other people. But we also want to talk today about maintaining or maybe even improving the connection that we have with our family members or those who are right there in our home. Right now, we're spending a lot of time together, and unfortunately, it's not like vacation. We're more stressed than we are when we go on vacation, and so people are at a heightened irritability level. And so we may have to make a more conscious effort to create some fun in our interaction with the people within our home, our spouses, our children, our significant others, grandparents, whoever we're living with. So we're throwing out some ideas here that we can maybe get back into doing. Board games, I think, is a great one. A lot of people like video games. There's nothing wrong with video games. I'm particularly bad at them. Maybe that's why I don't like them so well. But board games are great fun for everybody, and I think sometimes we forget about those things and how much fun they can be. And I know in counseling children, when they talk about activities they do with their parents, you'd be surprised how excited they can get about a game of Sorry or Monopoly or even Candyland. So let's remember about those kind of things that we can get re-engaged with, or it doesn't have to be board games. It could be games like charades or other kind of interactive games that might get us engaged in some pleasurable experiences with the people right there in our home. We can read books, and we can read books together. So reading books with your children and talking about those books, whether it be younger children or maybe with older children, we're each reading the book and then we get back together and talk about it. Going for walks can be a good way to bond with the people that you live with. Dancing, I also think is one worth mentioning because it's kind of hard to be in a bad mood if you start dancing. And I always like to preface that you don't have to be able to dance in order to enjoy dancing. My children like to tell me that I'm very bad at it. I don't have rhythm. I tell them I don't care. It's still really fun to do. So Doing things like dancing, turn on some music, and you might find out Grandpa has some really good moves. Who knows? And even if Grandpa has terrible moves, we might all get a good laugh. But being able to engage in things that lift our spirits. We could watch a movie together. I particularly am interested in watching comedies right now, things to kind of lighten the mood, but just to have something to watch together. I've been told Netflix is offering free movies right now, and there's some other sites, I think, that are doing so as well. So those are things that we can do together. Yoga is another good one because we're all at a kind of a heightened stress level, and yoga can be very calming. And so doing yoga with our spouse, with our children, doing it as a family can be a very calming experience. And there's so many apps you can pretty much download a free yoga activity at any given time. Cooking together is also a really great way to reconnect with people within our homes. And we can't go out to eat, so we're eating more meals inside right now or indoors at our house. So cooking together can be a fun, and actually we'll talk about it in a few minutes, even an educational experience when we include our kids in that activity with us. And one thing I'd really like to stress and emphasize, it's something that I stress all the time when I talk to families, even when we're not in the midst of COVID-19, is sitting down and eating meals together at the table with no electronics. I always tell my kids, even if we go out to eat, I have a joke, my kids are older, but if we go out to eat and you have your cell phone on, you better expect a separate check, because I'm trying to get them to be putting those phones up and buying into some communication. And so it really is a great way, and there's a lot of research out there that talks about the positive outcomes of just sitting down together at the dinner table. And you don't have to be a great cook. My kids would tell you I'm not. I think you can have grilled cheese and soup and still count that as a meal as long as we're sitting down together. So I would encourage you to do that on a regular basis, not just during COVID-19, but a lot of these suggestions are good all the time. And then storytelling, especially I think for children who live with grandparents, and they may have no understanding or idea about your own childhood and your own history. And so we're spending more time together. It can be an opportunity for grandparents and parents to share more stories and help your kids understand a little bit more about who you are. And that can be a really positive and bonding experience as well. Some other things I want us to consider. COVID-19 is obviously a very negative and stressful experience, but always we can find things to kind of reaffirm our belief in human beings. And it's been, I think, particularly moving to see some of the really positive things that other people are doing for one another in the midst of this crisis. And so it's also good for us to be able to get our kids involved in some of these things too. So we listed some examples here. If you have an older child, a teenager, they might be able to do something helpful like mow the neighbor's yard, especially if it's someone who's shut in, or maybe just making sure that we take time to call people, check on a neighbor who has no one else living with them, or maybe writing an encouraging message in chalk on their sidewalk, or doing something thoughtful for somebody else. And I think this is a great time to teach our children about doing that. So I wanted us to get into talking a little bit about our children and the emotional response that they can be having to COVID-19. Some important things I think for us to consider as caretakers, be it grandparents or parents. Children take their emotional cues from us. And so it's very important that we do things correctly, so to speak, in order that we are not contributing to the emotional distress that our children can have, because this is uncharted times for them and for us as well. One tip we would like to offer is that first, you start by checking the news instead of watching it continuously. I talk with some people who are watching the news literally from the time they wake up until the time they go to bed, and not surprisingly, those people tend to be the most anxious and the most distressed. And so we encourage people to check the news. If you watch the news at 8 o'clock in the morning and then you touch in at 6 o'clock, or unless the governor is doing a presentation, and then you touch in maybe at 11 o'clock. So we get enough. Trust me, if you've been watching all day, you're often hearing repeated information. And so just checking in a few times a day, I can guarantee you're going to get the information you need without having to hear things over and over and over, because when we listen continuously, it increases our distress, and then that is going to trickle down to our kids. And plus, kids hear these things on the news, and so listening to it continuously is distressing for all of us. So I would encourage you to check instead of continuous watch. Limit how much time you focus on or discuss these current stressors. So it shouldn't be the only topic of conversation in your home. Talk about other things, things that you look forward to or things that you've enjoyed together previously, but don't allow all of your discussion to just be about the current stressors. And let's take particular attention to avoid discussing things that are not age appropriate in front of our children. Some tips that we have about how do you address things with your children. I would advise you to answer children's questions honestly, but only provide age-appropriate information and not excessive details. And so if our kids want to know things, they're going to ask us, and then we need to just give them the appropriate amount of information that they need. Remind them what they can do to stay healthy. The biggest thing that they're doing to contribute is just what our governor and our president and the CDC have asked us to do. They've asked us to stay home and to make sure that we engage in hand washing. And those are things that even young children can be told that they're doing to help address COVID-19. Another thing is important is what we talked about a few minutes ago, to share with them the positives. So in other words, not all of this, not just all the bad stuff, but share some of the inspiring stories. I had a friend the other day that sent me a video about some people who had congregated, like not together, but they had come out and circled, standing appropriately apart, a hospital area, and they had engaged in singing and as an encouragement to the healthcare workers who are on the front line, giving their time and effort around the clock, or a story where people had set some candy on top of the EMT's car before she left for a long shift. And so it's really been neat. Restaurants who are providing free meals for healthcare workers, or people who are making masks, or schools who are making sure that students have food when we're out of school. So there's a lot of really positive stories that we can share and let our children know about the goodness of mankind in the midst of all this, and that's going to be important too. Some suggestions that we have about how you can start some discussion with your kids about feelings. This is a great time to help children learn how to manage emotions. And so especially when we're talking about young kids, but I don't know, I find even kids up into middle school years, we do this sometimes in therapy, enjoy what we call the M&M's feeling games. And what we do here is we just get a little bowl of M&Ms, and we take turns picking an M&M out. And you can do this with just you and one child. You can do it as a family activity. And depending on the color of the M&M that you get, you tell a story that made you feel angry, excited, happy, nervous, peaceful, sad. And you don't have to use these emotions. You can select other ones if you like. But we have the color-coded emotions, and then we take turns. And this allows for children to start to label their feelings and to talk about their feelings. So with the feeling games, we can really help kids at this point in time to increase their emotional regulation. In other words, they get better at identifying and managing emotions. And so we're all kind of panicked right now. I think about our kids are out of school and what kind of educational opportunities are they going to get. One thing I'd like you to remember is that the lessons we need in life are not all reading, writing, and arithmetic, so to speak. And so you've got a wonderful opportunity right now to really be increasing your child's emotional literacy, so to speak. And so don't devalue the things that your children can learn through this experience. And so if we can increase our children's ability to label, identify, talk about, and successfully manage their feelings, I think we've actually done a really good job in improving their overall education. So even when we're not focusing on the basics that school focuses on, we have an opportunity to really improve things with our kids' ability to manage things emotionally. And as I said, when we play the M&M's feeling games, we want adults to be included in this so that you can share your stories and experiences with your kids. And one of the things that you can do when you share your story is explain how you dealt with that negative emotion. And so that helps to teach our children how they can experience a negative emotion, label it, identify it, and then work through it. And so this can be a really good and fun way to work on emotional regulation. But the overall key here is that we want you to avoid social isolation. We want you to have that physical distance, but we want you to be finding ways to connect with people in your home and outside of your home. So bear that in mind. Some other fun things when we talk about how do we manage fears with COVID-19 or anxieties, especially with young kids. We can get really creative, and Dr. Marianna Footo-Linz is really creative, and so these are some of her ideas about what to do with young children when they're struggling with anxieties about COVID-19. And so she suggests that we could create a vivid character, and so we could kind of draw out what a little COVID-19 character might look like, and we can make him look really small, and we can maybe even talk about how we can use soap and hand sanitizer and physical distancing to defeat this little monster that we've created and called COVID-19. And so other creative ways, you might play out a scenario with puppets or other kind of creative ways in order to help children manage this anxiety and kind of see it in a manageable way. So those are some creative ideas that Dr. Linz has shared with us. Some relaxation things that we can do, and these are specifically, we've kind of designed them as a way to share relaxation techniques with children, but I will tell you that even as adults, these can be really helpful if we attempt these. The first one, we might tell our children to pretend to be a noodle. So you could think about like when you're cooking spaghetti and you talk about how stiff the noodle is before you put it into that pot of boiling water, but then the noodle tends to soften and go limp. And so if we stiffen our muscles like an uncooked noodle and then we relax our body and allow each part of our body to go limp like a cooked noodle, this is actually building on the principles of progressive muscle relaxation that we do in therapy with adults and children alike. But when we phrase it like this, it allows a kid to kind of conceptualize some relaxation activities, and it can be kind of fun. And you might do this together, and what it really does is help you to be aware of how maybe you're holding tension in your body, but being able to tighten those muscles and then relax them can be a very soothing and relaxing activity. Another one is shake your body like a monkey is what we say. And so if you literally try this, I often do this before I work out or after I work out because it is so relaxing. Just stretch your hands above your head with your hands flat, and then just drop them to where you're bending over at the waist, and you just really let your arms and head drag towards the floor, swing your arms from side to side like a monkey, we would tell our young child. But really what we're doing is we're just completely relaxing and letting all of that tension kind of flow out from our shoulder, neck area, where most of us tend to keep that tension in. Some other activities, ways that we can teach children about relaxation breathing. We sometimes conceptualize this as a balloon breathing. So we might tell the child to imagine that your belly has a balloon in it, and so we're wanting to teach them how to engage in appropriate breathing where they can breathe in and fill up that balloon completely. So we're teaching them how to really expand and engage in deep, relaxing breathing, and then to slowly let that air go out the way we might see in a balloon. And so this helps teach children how to engage in deep, relaxing breathing. And again, this is one of those activities that we use in therapy with both adults and children. This is just a way to maybe conceptualize it in a way that children are more comfortable with and might be able to understand a little better. But again, all three of these are things that we as adults can do as well. So we mentioned before that children take their cues from us. And so if we want our children, we want to help diminish their anxieties, we have to diminish our own first. And so it's kind of like when you're on an airplane. What they always tell you if you're traveling with a young child, make sure to put the oxygen mask on yourself before you put it on your child. And it's the same kind of thing. You've got to take care of yourself and managing your own anxiety in order that you can be helpful for your child. So we listed some ideas here. I think I've literally done all of these in the past several weeks that we've been isolated and quarantined. Taking a relaxing bath. There is something about just soaking in a bathtub. We have taken so many baths at our house right now. I'm concerned about the water bill, but it's worth it in the end. Light a candle with a comforting scent. That may be something that makes you think of Christmas or Thanksgiving or an apple pie that Grandma makes, or maybe you like things that are more fruity and remind you of the beach, something with coconut or pineapple in it. But just that pleasant smell can help us to associate positive feelings that we've had when we formerly been engaged with that smell. So light a good candle. Another big one is wear comfy clothes. And we've kind of joked about this here at my office where we're still coming in and doing telehealth services and a few in-person services as needed. But I said we've all got to wear comfy clothes. And so really when you're already stressed and anxious, you don't want to be putting on those pants that have a tight belt around them, or so we're all dressing really comfortably, and that just kind of reduces your stress level and makes you feel a little more comfortable. Reading a book, books, and even this next one, watching a funny or favorite movie, it allows us to escape. And so I would encourage you all to take time to do that. Read a good book, watch a movie, something that just takes your mind away from the current stressors that you have. Another great one is go for a walk outside. And I always stress this, even when we're not in COVID-19, there's so much research that supports the benefits of walking outside. We know that exercise is good for us, but there's added benefits about taking that walk outside. So I think that's one of the many benefits, there's many, of living in West Virginia, is that most of us have access to outdoor space that people perhaps in cities don't have. And so most of us have the opportunity where we can get outside and get some fresh air. So I would encourage you to do that. Sometimes I want you to take a walk with your family, and sometimes you may just need a walk for yourself, and that's okay too. In fact, that's a good thing. Practice the deep breathing, the balloon activity we just talked about. Like I said, those are activities we practice with adults too. We just discussed it like a blowing up a balloon so we could help conceptualize it for children. But take time to engage in this activity yourself. Giving yourself a little mini massage. Our shoulders are often an area, shoulders and neck, where we hold tension. So taking time to massage those areas. Massaging your feet and hands actually provide a lot of tension relief as well. So those are things you can do for yourself. And then let's not underestimate the value of cuddling with a pet. Animals are very helpful to reduce our anxiety and very comforting. So snuggle with your pet. Animals, I think I saw a little thing the other day online where animals are happy about COVID-19. They've never had so much human interaction. So there's a benefit for them. But you take advantage of that time with your animal too, and that can be very calming. But again, we want to emphasize, make sure adults to take time to take care of yourself. You can't take care of your kids unless you take care of you. It's not selfish. It's actually a really productive thing to do. Some other suggestions that we have, it can be real tempting to kind of get into this no schedule. You know, I've talked to several people, and they have very limited things going on, and those people tend to be the most distressed, and so their depression really gets revved up. So I encourage people as much as possible, and it's really important for us to do this for our kids as well, to keep a schedule. And we need to remember that our schedule has to have a variety of things. We do have to have things like chores and learning activities. Many kids are now doing their schooling online or they have packets that are delivered to them. There needs to be those set kind of times for learning activities, or if you are working from home as an adult, you've got to set aside time for work. But don't forget to also include time for fun activities. We all need a balance. We do have things we have to do, but we also have to have time to have fun activities. And so sometimes setting that schedule when we're isolated at home and we don't have the built-in schedule of reporting to work or reporting to school, setting up a schedule can be helpful. And we want to make sure that we're, of course, we said before, spending those meal times together, but keeping a fairly routine bedtime schedule. And so going to bed close to the same time, especially when we have young children, and continuing to engage in those typical kind of sleep hygiene things we do, keeping their routine. Maybe you give them a bath right before bed, a small snack, read them a story, brush their teeth, say their prayers, whatever your routine is, but keeping those routines. It's important that we assure that children are getting enough rest, because sleep actually promotes not only good physical health, but there is a lot of research that demonstrates the benefit of mood and cognition and concentration, and all kinds of elements of mental health are impacted by getting sufficient sleep. So the more we can kind of keep and maintain that schedule, the better off we're going to be in so many realms. And that's true for adults too. We put a whole separate slide in this. I've mentioned it a couple of times, but I think it really is important that we take advantage of any ability we have to get outdoors. As I said, because we live in West Virginia, this may look like your backyard. A lot of us are fortunate enough to back up to maybe a wooded area where we could maybe take a hike together, or walk around the neighborhood, or something like that where we can get outside. And these are just some of the examples of the demonstrated improvement with being outdoors. It can improve our mood, it increases our immunity, it increases cognitive creativity, and it increases our ability to focus and concentrate. So if you or your child are busy studying or working on a project, taking time to get outdoors for a little bit during part of the day can actually enhance your ability to be successful on those activities. So do take advantage. I think this weekend we're going to have some good weather. Today's a little chilly, but this past weekend was great. It really can have a positive impact on our mood. So we also want to give opportunity here to remind our children and to demonstrate this ourselves about ways that we can find to be helpful to other people. First benefit is finding ways to help other people actually distracts us from our own anxieties and worries. It promotes moral development in our children. And the truth of the matter is we all want to feel like we are able to do something to bring about something positive out of COVID-19. And so one of the things that we have written down here as a possible activity, and you can think of many more on your own, and maybe when you call in with questions, you'll have some other examples you can share with us. But one thing I like to do is send letters of gratitude to people who have been meaningful in your life. I did this one year as a New Year's resolution, and I think sometimes we forget to tell people who've been important to us. And so if we've got this time on our hands, it does a couple of things. One, I think it's a real benefit to the person who receives one of those letters. It kind of reminds us how fortunate we've been to have special people in our world. And so young kids can participate in this too. We can send them out in the mail. We can send them by email. But for really young children, we could have them draw a picture instead of writing a letter. So mail a picture to grandma or to your aunt or maybe even the neighbor or something. But letting people know you're thinking about them is really powerful, I think. And so that's one of the things that I hope that we'll take advantage of here at COVID-19 is to teach our children about doing for other people. And so modeling acts of kindness yourself. We've mentioned some of the things that we've seen people do, but just letting somebody know that you appreciate it. Maybe it's the person who is working long shifts at Walmart, who are keeping toilet paper and hand sanitizer put out on the shelf. Think about doing something nice for them. It might be you call the neighbors, and when they leave for work at 5 o'clock, we all go out and give them a round of applause or something. But even small things can do a lot to encourage other people. And modeling this for your children, I think, goes a long way. Some other ideas, we've talked about some of them, but maybe another one is making a video, especially when you have young kids. Make a video of them singing a special song and send it to somebody who is isolated. There are a lot of people who live alone, and they are literally isolated, maybe not even going out to the grocery store. They might have someone delivering their groceries out of fear of contamination. And so they're alone 24 hours a day. So a video with a song from a young child could be just the mood lift that they need. And what a great way to teach our children about how to help other people. So consider some of those things. And as I said, if you call in and you have some other ideas, we'd love for you to share. Okay, so we've kind of talked on this, letting other people know they're not alone. We all feel better when we know that other people are out there, and it makes us feel empowered when we help other people. So, right now being trapped at home, we might not feel like we're doing a whole lot to flatten the curve or to work against COVID-19, and the act of doing something can be beneficial to let us know that we are contributing in some way. Some other things that we had thought about that may be concerns for parents right now, especially given that kids are having to do a lot of their learning online, or I'm told that they're sending packets home to some children. So parents are literally having to feel like balancing between doing maybe their work from home and also being their child's teacher. So there might be some ways, some creative ways where you guys can work together. Let's say if you know some parents who are in the same grade as your child, you might organize a situation where one parent decides they're going to work on the math worksheet with the kids, and so all of the kids participate by Zoom or FaceTime from their phone with that one parent who goes over how to do percentiles or fractions. And then you trade off and you take the English portion of it. So you might be able to find ways to work together. That way it would lighten your load with having to be a pseudo teacher for your child if you were all working together. And then it'll be really nice because your kids will feel more connected and you'll feel more connected. But I also want to emphasize that there are less traditional ways that kids are going to get education during this time. When you're doing activities together, you might be surprised at the things your kids are actually learning. You can work on spelling and writing skills by writing letters to people. I always like to joke, make sure to teach them how to address an envelope. I'm finding a lot of young adults don't have this skill. So there's things that we can do on a day-to-day basis. Math skills while we're cooking, halving or doubling a recipe, can even teach fractions. So there's a lot of ways that we can provide education in less traditional kind of forums. So we know that there are a lot of people who are already homeschooling, and this may have presented some additional challenges, or maybe you feel more positioned to manage this because you've already been doing it. So you might even be a helpful resource to other parents about how they might manage this better, or maybe learning new ways and sharing those with one another so that you can be more effective. And I think the biggest thing is making sure you find ways to connect your kids with other kids through some of these social media forums can be helpful. But one thing I want to stress is it's important to be realistic and recognize we're not going to do everything perfect. You're not trained to be teachers when we're doing these things at home now that we haven't been used to doing, and you won't always keep a perfect schedule. So don't be too hard on yourself. We're giving you suggestions about things, and you won't do all of them every day. None of us do, but these are some ideas that might be helpful to you. But set those realistic expectations because we don't want you to burn out, and you might scroll back to the slide about how to take care of yourself because that's important. We have included some online resources. All of these are supposed to presently be free. Some of them I think are always free, but some of them typically have fees attached to them. But all of these right now are offering free services so that people can access these so that kids have additional resources. So we're appreciative that a lot of these places are stepping up and providing these resources. So you can consider some of these will be helpful too. Another thing that might be helpful, and it's one of these things I've been doing myself, is consider journaling a little bit. And I'm not doing anything lengthy, and you don't have to either, or you can, whatever works for you. But one thing I'm doing each evening is I'm listing 3 things that I'm grateful for that day. And it's kind of neat if you just you can do it on paper and keep like a running list. You can do them on your notes section of your phone or somewhere else. But when we list those things each day, what that's actually doing is kind of reframing our minds to think positively. There's so much heaviness right now and so many stressors that we have to deal with. We really need to make sure that we take a little bit of time to focus on some positives. And so it can kind of refocus us on things that we can be grateful for. Sometimes it's good to do this right before we go to bed so we kind of have that pleasant focus. Or if there seems to be a lag in what to talk about over family meals, this can be a good game to play. One thing, too, I want to remind you guys, don't forget to talk about future plans. Maybe there's a family reunion coming up, a camping trip, or some other activity that you typically do or you plan to do. Talk about those things because it reminds kids and ourselves that this is temporary and there really are good things ahead, and that's important for us all to remember. But with all of this said, I want to remind each of you that there are professional resources available if needed. And I hope we're starting to remove the stigma of mental health. Seeking help is actually not just okay, but it's wise. Finding healthy ways to cope with negative emotions. So many professionals are offering telehealth services to assist children and adults who need help with dealing with negative emotions. So don't hesitate to reach out, okay? And finally, as we're wrapping up here, I wanted to kind of sign off here with a quote from Mr. Rogers. When I was a boy and I would see scary things in the news, my mother would say to me, look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping. To this day, especially in times of disaster, I remember my mother's words, and I am always comforted by realizing that there are still so many helpers, so many caring people in this world. And I think that's true today. And so let's focus on the people that we see that are helpers and maybe find ways that we too can become helpers. Shanen, I'll turn it back over to you.
Yes, thank you so much, Tammy. Great information in there. We've now come to the interactive portion of today's presentation, and along with Tammy, we're also joined by Marianna Footo-Linz of the Department of Psychology at Marshall University in Huntington, West Virginia. If you have questions or comments for Tammy or for Marianna, please use the Q&A feature in WebEx. If you don't see it, there's on your screen. You can bring up the 3 little bubbles and type your questions in now. So I'm going to turn things over to today's webinar producer, Misty Dyke, to help guide us through the question and answer process. Misty?
All right, thanks, Shanen. We do have kind of a combination comment and question that's come in. I saw a video of a grandchild on their grandparents' front porch with a glass storm door separating them, and they were playing tic-tac-toe using a dry erase marker on the glass.
Oh, that's awesome.
That seemed like a unique visit while maintaining a safe distance. What other activities could be suggested, maybe specifically for grandparents, and could people put their suggestions in the chat box?
Well, I think that's great. I'm writing that one down now, dry erase marker playing tic-tac-toe. That's awesome. And, yeah, it would be great if people share those. So I'm not as creative as many of you all are out there, so sharing those would be great. Maybe even doing like the dance thing that we talked about. They can dance on one side of the screen, we can dance on the other. Marianna, do you have any other suggestions? You're much more creative than I am.
Well, I don't know about that, but also think in terms of like a daily check-in or two, which can be good, especially if some of the grandparents may have some health issues. Although, a lot of grandparents are younger these days and healthier. But daily check-ins at a specific time around a specific hour can be something that both kids and grandparents start to look forward to. If they share a common interest, or if there's a hobby that the grandparent has that they could kind of share with that grandchild, over whether it's over FaceTime or over the phone, or between the door, I think that is really a neat thing. But somewhere where they sort of begin to develop some common interests and can talk about those kind of things. Anything that sort of puts them in contact with each other and gets them connected in a way that builds that relationship out. So it's not just about us being in touch now that there's this virus going around, but what are we doing that's really going to build this relationship going forward? And think in terms not just of the grandparent who's right here and right available in town maybe, or if you're from my neck of woods, they live in your holler, not just about that grandparent, but also the grandparents that may be at a distance. This may be a good opportunity, again, to begin to build that relationship. One of the things that can be really fun if the grandparent lives away is, and it's less expensive than the letter writing, is doing postcards and sending them back and forth to each other. Either postcards that you find, but also postcards that you make. I always forget you can make stuff. But you literally can take a piece of cardboard, make sure that it's the right size to go through the mail, and the child can draw on the front of it and put their own picture on it and write a message and send it to Papa and Mama, and that can really just lift and brighten your day. So think in terms of things that you can do going forward, that help to develop that relationship. And I can't stress how important grandparents sharing stories about their childhood and their experiences, how important that is to grandkids and how much that builds the relationship. I was sharing with Dr. Corbett-Alderman a story about my son. My dad, we were fortunate to have him live with us for several years toward the end of his life, and he and my son developed this wonderful relationship. And when we first moved where we were, we had a lot of power outages. And it was springtime and summertime, so when the power would go out, we'd light candles and maybe sit out on the porch and just talk and laugh and tell stories. And I didn't think anything about it until one day my son came in. He was about 4 years old, and he goes, "Mom, is the power going to go out today?" And of course, I'm a psychologist. I thought he was worried and scared. I said, "Oh, no, honey, the power grid is perfectly stable and fine," and blah, blah, blah. And finally, I looked at him, and he's disappointed. And I said, "What's wrong?" He said, "I was hoping the power would go out so we could sit around and tell stories and light candles." And it dawned on me, we don't have to wait for a power outage or COVID-19 to encourage us to do these kind of things. Let this sort of be our beginning of what we carry forward in terms of creating and deepening these relationships.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Let's see. That example of kids playing tic-tac-toe on the storm door reminded me of something that I've seen where people were getting ready for Easter coming up, and parents taped off their storm door kind of in a stained glass pattern, and then had the kids fill in, the different parts of the window using erase markers or washable markers or whatever. I thought that was pretty neat.
Mm-hmm. Oh, just really quick, because I don't want to squash any Q&A that might be coming in. But when you mentioned the idea of spirituality, every family is different. Not every family shares the same spiritual background. Not all families have that component. But never underestimate the power of what we call rituals when people are going through stressful times. Things that you call them rituals or traditions that you begin to develop that are things that can become very special to your family maybe there are things that you used to do that you don't do anymore because you think the kids are either too old or not interested or whatever, whether it's coloring Easter eggs or I've heard of some families that make a spring tree, and they just decorate it with all of the different things that they make or different things that they've accumulated, almost like a Christmas tree, but it has that theme of things becoming new again and bright and colorful and rebirth. But think about rituals that you can engage in or traditions that you can create with your kids that really can not only become part of a deeper relationship, but also can begin to kind of calm some anxieties that might be creeping up these days.
All right. We'll move on to the next question that I have here. I know we were talking earlier about not watching news constantly throughout the day and just kind of checking in. And this question kind of touches on that. When we're trying to protect children from all of the COVID-19 news, it's hard to control what they're picking up on and hearing either, from TV, other people, other family members. But if you do some of the exercises and you're able to get your children to verbalize fear for themselves or for others, then what do? Kind of what are the next steps once you're able to get your child to verbalize that?
Well, I think first of all, validating that feeling. We don't want to dismiss their feelings. They have every right, and it's normal to feel a certain level of anxiety or fear. So we want to validate those feelings first, and then we want to talk about the things that they can do to keep themselves safe, the things that we're doing to help keep them safe. And so when we provide them some education, it can really, I think, serve to reduce their fear. So we first want to validate that, allow them to talk about it. It's okay to be afraid. It's okay to be scared. When we're feeling anxious, these are some things we can do. Some of those little activities we talked about, like the relaxation activities, can be helpful. So validating and then figuring out things that you can do to reduce those physical symptoms of anxiety and giving them enough information that they know what they can do to be safe and sharing with them what you're doing to keep them safe, I think, is helpful.
And really to underscore what Tammy is saying about that, when kids express a fear or a concern, and we validate it and say, I can understand why, and a way to do it is say, I can understand why you might feel a little bit afraid right now that you might get sick or I might get sick or that Mama or Papa might get sick. But you know what? By us staying at home and keeping in touch by phone and making sure our hands are clean, that's how we're making sure that we don't get sick. Because what we're doing then is saying, I understand that feeling, and then we're also giving them a little bit of power and control, pointing out to them that when you feel anxious and afraid, there are things that you can do to help yourself feel more in control, and doing the kinds of things that reduce your risk can do that. And also being forward thinking, reminding them it's really easy to get caught up in how things are right now and forget that at some point this is going to get better and things are going to return to something that's more normal. It might be a different normal, but it's going to be normal. And so being a little more forward thinking so that after you process the emotion, that we're sort of moving forward and thinking about, okay, when this is over, let's talk about what's the first thing we're going to do that you're really missing. Maybe it's go over and see a friend or get together outside with your friends and play and those sorts of things. So get them forward thinking about when this moves on, how things are going to be more normal again. That's really important too. Also remember that young kids sometimes can carry around fears that are inaccurate, that are kind of making them nervous because it's the way they understand the world. I think about preschoolers in particular because they're so busy creating an understanding of the world. Sometimes they come to some weird conclusions. So they may be hearing things about, be careful, don't make your grandparents sick. Well, they may think by just talking to them on the phone or, whatever, it can be very weird things like just thinking about them, I might make them sick. Well, we hear that and we go, well, that's just silly. But, when you're 4, and you're trying to create your understanding of the world and you hear on TV, don't make your grandparents sick, that's the kind of thing that you can create. So even if they're not telling you they're afraid, check in with them, especially if you see behavior changes. They're more clingy than they used to be. They're more irritable. They're fighting with a sibling more, or even this is not a child that usually hits or those kind of things, but now they're hitting people and, maybe even having bathroom accidents. Those can be signs that they're carrying around some anxiety, and it's time to check in and say, let's sit down and talk a little bit because I'm wondering what's on your mind about all of this. And you might find that there's some interesting things going on in that little head that you can make them feel a whole lot better about real fast.
Those are great points. And I think you kind of touched on this at the beginning of that last one. What do you say to a child who's afraid of going outside and being exposed? Is there anything else you'd like to elaborate on that? I know you mentioned, doing the things, the physical distancing and washing our hands, and that's what we're doing to help protect ourselves.
I think the biggest things, kind of like what Dr. Linz was saying, is just making sure that we have we understand what their fears are, because a lot of times, like she said, they're misunderstanding. They're coming to conclusions that aren't accurate. So making sure that they know in an age-appropriate fashion accurate information, I think, can go a long way with that.
Yeah, and when it comes to going outside, that is a very common fear that I'm hearing among younger kids, is that they'll tell their parents, like their parents will go, well, let's go outside and get some fresh air. No, the virus is out there. The virus is out there. So they've developed sort of that magical thinking that I'm in the house and I'm safe, but I go outside and I'm not safe. So helping them understand, even doing some fun play activities that illustrate that when you go outside, there's more space, so the likelihood that there's any virus around is less, as long as we're careful. And we practice the guidelines that are safe. And so we keep our distance and we greet our neighbors in ways that, let them know that we still love them and still care about them, but we can't necessarily get as close. In fact, if you're going to go outside and take a walk around the neighborhood, sort of make it a game and say, let's come up with some silly, goofy ways to say hello to people in a way that will make them smile and brighten their day. Maybe it's I'm going to do a little dance, or I'm going to jump up and down. Kids are great at finding things that make other people smile. I can't shake their hand, so maybe I stand over here and I do a big air hug, and I hug myself and I tell them, and I'm going to bring one of those to you when this is all over. Because they might find that not only do they have fun and they feel better, but they're going to brighten that other person's day, and always point out to them, we just passed Mrs. So-and-so, and when you did that, did you see that smile on her face? You made her day. Empower these kids and let them know what a bright spot they can be to other people. That's super important.
All right. We've had some questions and comments come in through the Q&A there, just people kind of sharing things that they're doing, some good ideas there, people suggesting recording a story and sending it to a child. I believe that was when we were talking about things that we can do with grandparents. Mm-hmm. And something my partner and I have been doing with friends and family in other states and areas is to set up dinner dates and brunch by a Google Duo or Skype to stay connected.
Well, that's awesome.
Fun. And not really a question, just sharing what has happened a bit in my household. We've been viewing this as a chance to finally relax and donate things that we don't really need to people who do, and getting some cleaning done and spending some family time focusing on what truly matters.
Great. Yeah, I was looking at the one before that where she said she's playing Spot It with her 5-year-old grandson. That's such a wonderful game and so much fun and a nice way to interact. And even if kids don't have a grandparent that they can keep up with, or if there's somebody that they are interacting with, that's fine. But there's a lot of nursing homes that have people there that on a daily basis have no contact with people. And maybe calling a nursing home and saying, if my child makes some cards and sends them, not to anybody even specific, but could you use those and pass them out? that can be a really good way for your child to engage and to bring a little sunshine somewhere. And they may hear back from the person, and start a nice relationship that way, or at least hear from the nursing home about how much what they're doing brightens the days of other people. Consider doing
that. All right. With that, we are going to wrap up today's session. Please, on your way out of the WebEx, make sure and fill out. We have a brief 3-question assessment that will help us plan future sessions in our Survival Guide series here for Healthy Connections. Contact information is on the screen. If you'd like to reach out to any of our presenters, please do so at any time. With that, we'll sign off today's webinar, Physical Distancing with Children and Grandchildren, a Survival Guide. Have a great day.